here it is.
There you go.
Let's see. You got anything you want me to say, like right off, or okay?
Don't matter to me.
All right.
Your
What?
show.
Yeah, it is. I guess we're making it up as we go here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're here with John Patterson at Atlanta Athletic Club. Hey, John. How you doing?
So far, so good.
All right, it's good. It's early this morning, but thank you so much for having us here, and we're just going to do a shop tour. You want to show us around? Well,
Sure.
wherever you want to start. Well, I mean, we're right here with this beautiful rack of reels, and these are not spares, are they?
No, we don't have anything spare. We use everything that we
Okay.
have. A long time ago, I was able to sell the concept of having swap out or maintenance cutting units in order to be able to maintain the quality of cut out on the golf course, and it keeps us away from having to work overtime turning reels around. Because as you know, we're turning especially greens reels around a lot after top dressing and things like
for
that.
sure.
But we have enough here where we can swap out fairway unit, both fairway units on one course, as well as a practice mower, and then we'll just line them up on the ground, and then the following day or 2 days later, whatever as the schedule allows, we can get it done when it fits into the plan.
One thing you were saying that was kind of interesting is on a triplex, if you have one reel that takes a hit, you end up changing out both triplexes? Or there's something?
Yeah. We try to, like in a case where we're running 2 triplexes to motifs, for example, and they've been out half a dozen times or whatever, if one of them doesn't pass inspection for any reason, we'll go ahead and we'll swap both sets just so we keep uniformity. We don't want one super fresh set along with one that's had some runs on it. So I have 2 swap out sets here of triplex reels, and you know, we're able to do it that way. We do inspect our cutting units after every use, so for cut and height, and if anything gets knocked out, we can adjust it and take care of it that way. But if one of them does get something pulled through it and it's you know, got a bent blade or whatever, we're gonna be swapping, and we do keep in sets. So we're not just swapping one reel, we're swapping the whole set whenever we change them out.
Yeah. And you're keeping all your diameters consistent and bed knife lengths consistent. And
yeah, on the triplexes, I'll keep them within about 50 thousandths in diameter. Greens reels, I try to keep everything within about 25 thousandths in diameter. It's not as important on our QA7s because that's a movable reel and a fixed bed knife position. But still, I try to keep things as close as practical. If I had a fairway unit that had been taken down 100 thousandths in diameter, and we had one take a hit and I had to replace that one reel, I am going to grind that new reel down and relief it so it matches the set.
Even on a fairway where your bed knife's fixed. And that shouldn't matter as much, right?
As much, but everything matters.
Everything
matters. I just don't want it to come back on me. If there's any problem out there, I want it to be their grass, not my machine.
And I do think, it's how far that the blade reaches out, to grab the grass too. It's definitely a factor there, not just the other things like behind center distance and all that fun stuff. Well, let's move on to your next area.
Well, this is kind of our general use bench. We do all of our bed knife swaps here, as well as just general sharpening
chainsaws.
Yeah. And whenever they come in, we're dressing.
I'm assuming this means mixed fuel.
Yeah.
The green color.
Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff.
This one's waiting on a new throttle control assembly to be installed. That'll happen tomorrow.
Do you use
outs.
the welding table for welding?
Actually, no.
No. Okay. All right.
The welding table was bought because when I first got here, we had a real problem with the heights on our rotary decks, and we had no real reliable way to measure height on the rotary decks. So we've got a jib crane here that we can roll the cutting deck over and lift it up onto the table once it's cleaned off.
Yep.
And then I can reach up through the slots with a tape measure and measure my blade tips.
Okay.
And parallel up and set my height on all my rotary decks. We do that every winter. We strip all the rotary decks off and we go through them all because during season we got some rough.
Oh, right, yeah.
We'll find at least one bent one. So,
that's cool,
if we've got any
idea.
problems with aftercut or whatever on a rotary, that it gives us another tool to check it out. Also, a nice heavy mount for our arbor press that we use for.
Yeah, what do you primarily use the arbor press for?
Pressing roller bearings off of shafts, pressing new bearing assemblies into hub housings and things like that.
Okay.
Just
It's kind of been
use.
on my list of tools I would like to have, but I don't.
It's really nice because you can.
I hadn't used one enough, I guess, to know how nice it is, or how much I need it.
Most of the stuff that we do doesn't really justify, the heavy hydraulic press. It's pretty easy to push the stuff off.
Yeah.
But it gives you a nice smooth press too, rather than trying to hammer stuff into housings and like that. So you're not liable to mushroom shafts as much.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, a lot more feel involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So that's pretty much this area. We've got our swap out fairway knives under here, chop saw, some spare. Spare. We hardly ever use baskets on triplexes. These are the center basket carrier frames for our John Deere triplexes. They're hardly ever used except for a couple of times a year. So those are out of the way, and that's basically it for this area.
I got to know, what do we do with this big vise?
That's our super heavy work happens right here.
Okay, that's where the heavy
on
work
this
happens.
3-foot bench.
Yep.
Actually, this bench is pretty stout because we've got all of our swap out rollers underneath, so it's got lots of counterbalance.
Counterbalance, yeah.
No, this is hardly ever used. I inherited these wooden benches and just haven't had a chance to change them out with steel benches. But it does come in handy every once in a while if I've got some little knick-knack that I need to hold on to. But usually this is bed knife staging for...
I would have never guessed that you stage QA5 bed knives here.
Yeah.
Since there's no paint on the wall right there where, it was like perfect where it fits up there.
Now, this is a good example. You see the X on this bar here. I started grinding this knife and was grinding real heavy on this end. I don't know if you can see the pattern drop off here.
Yeah.
So I know that the surface of my bar isn't true. So I've got this one X'd out. Then I'll pull this new knife off. This is JRM knife. I know that the knife wasn't that bent.
Right.
So this will go up in the grinder and I'll grind that mounting face true to the pivot bolts, and then when it goes back in, it'll be good. But
I've had quite a few of those bed bars get warped or bent, not warped, bent after taking a hit. I mean, obviously they hit something, and they'll be out 20, 30 thousandths.
Right. And I'm always indexing my grind off of the pivot bolts, so the machine is straight. We're straight to those pivot bolts. So if what we're mounting up in there is crooked, then we're going to get a crooked grind. So
Yeah. So what are you using this for?
that's for winding my pivot bolts in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, I love it.
I used to do
That's
it
awesome.
by hand for
Yeah.
years, but you just line that baby in. And
Yep. And you got the clutch, and yes, I love it. That's good stuff. Yep.
quick and easy.
Yep. That's handy. That's handy. Are you torquing bed knife screws?
I am.
Yep, you are.
60 inch-pounds
Okay.
on all my John Deere stuff.
A little bit more than John Deere recommends?
No,
No,
I think
60?
it's 62 actually.
Okay.
Is
All right.
the spec.
You're just under.
I got to look at the torque wrench. and make
Okay.
sure.
No, it's all good.
But we do
you
use a
just
torque
have
wrench.
a typical torque wrench?
Yep.
Because
Click style.
it came up in the WhatsApp group the other day about using a T-handle torque wrench you can get.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's pretty.
You can get them preset too, in the.
Okay.
So there's no chance of getting it knocked out
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah.
But you do have to send them back. I think every year or two to
Right,
get
them
recalibrated. But
I mean, as much as you're torquing bed knife screws, I mean, that doesn't sound like it's that often.
right,
How about this guy? You like this thing?
love it for with
Cleaning
the-
off bed bars
Exactly.
with a Scotch-Brite?
Yep. I'm using the extra fine Scotch-Brite pad.
Mm-hmm.
And then also on the ends of the bars where you'll get a little buildup on the end of the bar there.
Yeah. Yep.
Cleans that right up.
Didn't even take the paint off.
Well, it does.
There's
take
no
the
paint.
There's no paint. We're down. And that's one of the things too, is I do take the paint off. Coming from the factory, these are just full of paint. And the mounting bar, or the mounting bolt rather, comes down and seats on a counter bore in there.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's from the factory, these are super hard to get installed. So I actually use a 1/2-inch end mill with my hand and just peel the paint out with a 1/2-inch end mill. And that takes me down to a nice
That's
positive
a good idea.
surface.
Yeah.
Because there is a little bit of play in the threads, but when it seats down in there, it seats flat against that shoulder. So you know that the bolt itself is perpendicular.
Yeah, that's a good tip. What are we greasing over here with this?
I grease all of my cutting units as they come across the grinder.
And on a 14 blade, you can't get to the grease fitting, right?
Except for with an adapter like that.
So is this a special adapter?
No,
Or you can buy this somewhere?
yeah. I'm not sure where I picked that one up, but I use my
The old lock and lube. Yep.
And that baby gets locked in there, and it makes it nice and rigid. You can reach right down in there and get your bearing housings with that through, and you got shield clearance and just,
That's awesome.
you do. Of course, it's good practice to wipe off your grease zerks before, because that's just a machined radius that fits down on the ball, and there's no real seal there other than the precision of the machined surface. So I always put it down on there and give it a little rock if I can, make sure it's seated before I put pressure to it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. You
Works
getting this? It's good stuff. All right. So, bed knife grinder.
Yeah, my Ideal 6000.
Ideal 6000.
I love it.
And you're grinding to the pivot bolts. I've heard Mike Rollins say that 100 times.
Yeah, this is something that I worked with Mark Pilger on years ago. I actually wanted, on the old 6000, with the old style of mounting, I wanted vertical pins to be able to push the knife back, because I was wasting so much time. We had dual grinding heads. I could grind the top and the front at the same time, but it was taking me forever to mount a knife. So he came up with a vertical pin alignment system where you could set your knife in and slide it back, and it would stop on the pivot bolts, and that would set your front face. But the bottom was still setting on a dowel on one end and a pin on the other, and you had clamps to come down, and it was not as elegant, if you will, as this. I think it was actually a Toro engineer who said, who told Mark, well, that's a neat idea, but why don't you do both planes, and just set the pivot bolt down, and so yeah, I've been a fan of this ever since. And while when you've got a half a dozen of the same kind of knife to do, you can pretty much load your next knife in under 30 seconds. And once the knife is married to the bed bar, you don't have to go back and forth with touch. You just bring the stone down until you just touch one end of the knife, and you know that you're going to be parallel all the way across.
Okay.
So it saves a lot of time unloading, and everything is real repeatable, and you get the speed from grinding both sides at the same time. And I really like it because you don't tend to over grind one face or the other, because it's always kind of, well, I always did it where I took the top end to where I just saw a little bit left on the front, and that, well, okay, I'll face it back then until that point. Well, here you can kind of sneak up on it and do that on the fly.
No, that's cool.
So I like it.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, I thought the front's thinner, so let me grind more off the front, and then I got less to grind off the top.
Okay.
And that works. If you want to increase your behind center distance and have it way different than the cutting unit it's next to.
Right.
That works great.
Yeah. And the whole behind center distance thing, I really didn't start paying attention to really until the last few years. It just was what it was. I knew when I was down at PGA National, we had a case that I still remember. We had one of our Toro greens mowers was just baling hay, and I didn't know what to look for, and then I wound up swapping bed bars out, and it fixed it. And so what's going on here, Well, it turns out that one was like 100 thousandths more behind center than the other. And so now whenever I take a knife off of the grinder, a greens knife, I measure front to back, and I record that with a Sharpie on the bed bar. And then when they're used, I'm using the highest number first. So I'm keeping that clip point as far ahead on the reel as I can, and I'm keeping them all pretty close.
Pretty
close.
That's good.
But yeah, I grind all my QA5s, 10 top, 15 front. I know that sticker up there says 14, but I've since went to 15. And it was funny, this is the first place that I've lived with zoysia grass on my fairways. And we were always getting those white tips in the afternoon, and just kind of even though the reels and the knives were sharp, it just wasn't as good of a clip as it needed to be. So I kept pushing that front angle back more and more. I had always mowed Bermuda in Florida, and turns out that's pretty easy to cut.
Yeah, it is.
So
it is.
So this zoysia grass was a learning experience for me, and the abrasiveness of it. It's like mowing steel wool, basically. So, so once I got up to about 12 degrees or 13 degrees on my front face, it started to look a lot better. So I said, well, I'm close to my greens angle anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and grind my fairway front faces at 15, and bang, that was what I needed. That's what I needed.
And you don't have to move your pen.
Right. Yeah. My grinder, my front face hardly ever moves unless I'm going to do the Toros, which are pretty vertical compared to everything else. I think I'm mowing or grinding those about 5 degrees on the front face. on my 3100s. But that's all of my QA7s, all of my QA5s are 15 front. My greens, I'm doing 10 top. My QA7s, I'm doing 8 top, which pretty much matches factory. And the wear pattern that I'm seeing on the top of the knife isn't too broad. So, and those with the hardened inserts take forever, even with the CBN wheel.
Oh, really?
They're just so hard.
Yeah.
So,
I've heard really good things about how long the cut lasts on those.
Yeah, we're getting anywhere 14 to 18 mows out of them. And that's like the Highlands. I was just doing some other work on that. We've got 21 acres of fairways on Highlands, and the mowers will go out, and so each mower is doing about 10 acres per mow, and it will go out. If it goes out, 12, 14 times, it's mowing a lot of acres in between grinds. And anymore we don't push them until they're just dead. If they just start to go off, we're starting to see a little bit of a ridge on the ends. We'll go ahead and we'll pull them, because ultimately it takes us less time in the shop. I'm having to grind less off of that top face, which really takes all the time, because you don't really want to lean on the top face, because you don't want to bow the knife at all. You want that to be true. So, and then we're mowing our fairways right now at 500, but we're going to be coming down. Usually we're down in the 450, 475 on our fairways, but this year Lucas wants to see how low we can maintain that Zorro Zoysia. So we're going to get down in the 300s.
That's going to be something else. I mean, actual, what is that going to be? In the 2s somewhere?
Somewhere.
With a QA7, it's got to be.
We're going to see. We're going to see. I'm having to put 2.5-inch rollers on the fronts in order to get down there, but we'll be fine with our knives. We've got.
Will you try to keep the same behind center?
Well, it is what it is. My roller mounts are all the way up right now. On
so
setting 1.
Not really much flexibility. With that.
It's going to be what it is. If I want more, I've measured the behind center on the QA7s, and with that knife, it's up right around 200, and I don't face those back really much beyond 250, because that insert isn't that deep.
Okay.
So there's not that much room to work with. So.
Have you noticed when you're going to lower high to cut on a fairway, the thickness of the bed knife, does that make a huge difference, like that front face thickness?
It does for striping, for sure. I didn't realize that, the front face really, the thicker the front face, the more leaf blade you're picking up. And also then comes your rear roller. So if it's stood up already, then it really accentuates how much you lay it over. Okay. If you're not picking it up that much, you're clipping, and your rear roller doesn't seem to lay it over as much. That's my theory on it anyway. But I've seen that running your front face thickness, like on our TIFF Grand approaches, I've always run a pretty thin knife on my triplexes, and the complaint was, it's just not striping up. It's just not striping up, and we're mowing at 375, but my front faces were only maybe 75 on my front faces on my knives. Well, I put a thicker knife on there with a thicker front face, about a 150 front face, and all of a sudden we've got much better striping.
Okay.
So that really helped.
I remember talking to Glenn Johnson out at Reynolds, and this was, forever ago, and I'm pretty sure mowing ryegrass, he recommended, even at like fairway height, 500 or something, he used a T-knife.
Yeah.
For that, because he said the thick fairway knife would push over more of the ryegrass than cut it. So, it's just all these different, trains of thought that happens out there.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of proof to back it up, So that's something I guess we got to work on.
Well, it's whatever works with you.
True.
The only place I was ever working with overseeded Bermuda with rye was at PGA National, and we overseeded the championship course, every year for the Honda, and it seemed like the more seed that they put down, they would go, I don't know how many tons per acre. It was
tons
just,
per acre.
It was just, oh my God.
Yeah.
You really had to look for Bermuda under all that. But yeah, it took a stripe whether you liked it or not. It was just brilliant. But that's where I got into the playing with the roller configurations too, because all the overlap marks that we were getting. So that's when I worked with Toro. We were running Toro there, and the Toro engineers actually came out, and that's when they came up with the shouldered rear rollers or shouldered front rollers on the rear cutting units, and then narrow rear rollers on the rear cutting units, thinking that we're trying to get to where everything is cut once and rolled once uniformly across 5 cutting units. And that's because you got 2 different problems. You got a double cut and a double roll in the overlap. So if you only focus on one side of it, you're only fixing half the problem.
Yeah, and if I remember right, Toro's solution was roll more and cut less.
Right.
If it was a double cut line.
Exactly.
And then, if it's a double roll, I guess you try to cut more.
Yeah, so that's where that shouldered front roller of the rear cutting unit rolls over the grass again and takes away some of the cutting efficiency out of that overlap. And then the narrow rear roller doesn't roll it again.
Yeah.
So worked out.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, it looked great for tournament.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
So moving on to the reel grinder and your lift here. This is interesting. You don't see this in very many places.
Yeah, this is
all
really
my travels.
This is really key to making the whole system work. Really,
because you got your racks, right?
Exactly, with the maintenance cutting units on the racks, coming on and off the grinder, on and off the rack, on and off the floor and the bench. It just makes the whole system work. So with this, we can take a set of cutting units off of a fairway unit, roll them across the floor like these triplex units are here, pick them up off of the floor onto the workbench, break them down. I've even got it set up to where if we need to change out a greens mower, we can just hook up the trailer to the bench and pick the cutting unit off of the mower.
Okay.
Right there, and we don't. The machine never has to hit the floor, so it works really great. It's rated for 800 pounds, 800 pounds, and it's plenty for what we need.
Any cutting unit in our industry, as far as I know.
And walk mowers, fixed head walkers. We've got 4 of the 260 SLs that we use up around the clubhouse. And that we've got some of the big QA7s, 31-inch QA7s.
All right.
Really, the heaviest we've got is the 32-inch, 7-inch DPAs.
On
the 3100s.
3100s.
Yeah. So it's got no problem picking those up, but it sets right down on the floor. Now it's not wide enough. The legs aren't wide enough apart to roll one of those real big cutting units in, But if you put the forks up that high, you're only having to pick one end of the cutting unit up onto the forks. And then the chains just hold the cutting unit up on there, and the slope of the forks keeps the chains tight as you're
But the
rolling it.
QA7 would still fit in there.
Yeah,
right?
QA7s fit on there.
I mean,
It's the only ones I have an issue with are the 26 and above.
Okay.
You know. So, but the vast majority of our cutting units are 22-inch. We don't have any 18-inch here. We don't have enough movement in our greens to justify it.
Yeah.
So,
with a floating head greens mower.
Yeah. I think a lot of guys go to 18-inch just out of caution, and they'd be fine with a 22.
Yeah. Yep.
But and then
cool stuff.
The Peerless 7000, basically our surface plate with a grinder attached.
And that's why your surface plate is covered up?
Yeah, pretty much. There are some things that, you just can't beat a surface plate for.
I watched your video, like squaring the rear roller.
Yeah.
Doing that on the surface plate.
Yep.
For the fixed head, the SL mowers.
Yep.
So super.
If if the mower is within the range of adjustment of the rear drum, then you can't beat doing it on a Peerless because you're right here, and you have access walking all the way around just like you do on a surface plate.
Yeah.
So I don't like getting a bunch of grease on the grinder, but that's the only thing that's holding you back, really. And this one, of course, I can't leave anything alone. This one's been hot rodded a little bit.
That's what hot rodders do, isn't it?
I changed out the drive on the grinding wheel, and so now it's high speed.
Okay.
It was 1-to-1 with the drive motor at 3,450 RPM, and now we're spinning a little over 5,000.
Okay.
And that really helps with relief grinding. I can do almost any blade in one pass.
Yeah, that's something else.
I'm reliefing a 14 blade QA5 in about 3.5 minutes now.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
And then when I'm paralleling, of course, Toro DPAs, you're not needing to jack up the back as much as the QA5s, but with the QA5s, to check your front roller eccentrics, you're always wanting to jack up your rear roller, and so now I have a pneumatic lift that I put on the back.
Are you serious right now?
That's it.
That's so cool, man. That is awesome.
That is actually a 1/4-inch stroke air cylinder.
No way.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I made the mount for it to be adjustable for the different diameter rollers, so I can parallel up QA7s on here too. And that's another thing that paralleling a movable reel type cutting unit like the QA7 on a Peerless requires that extra step where you grind the reel to a true cylinder. It comes off the grinder, you mount your knife, and you move that reel down to the knife. The knife comes back out, the reel comes back on the grinder. You don't move the reel anymore. Now you're adjusting your front roller and eccentrics to set that position. Yeah. So it's a multiple step, whereas it could go right over onto the go to assembly and then go onto the surface plate and parallel traditionally over there. And then my other hot rod is I got rid of the universal joint, and that is the flex drive out of a Flex 21.
Yep, I recognize that.
I figured if they're strong enough to spin a reel on a Flex 21.
Right.
And that's just, I hate to have the drive extension flop down whenever I am done with it. It just it holds your drive extension out, and it gives you a true constant velocity drive.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff.
Even though you're almost always in close parallel, but it's easier in and out when I'm the guy that does all the grinding.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
I try to make everything as fast and as easy as possible because, truth be told, I really don't like to grind. You know,
Well,
I
who
would much
does, really?
rather, I would much rather be doing other things.
Yeah.
So why not make it as painless as possible?
Right. Yeah.
So that's why one of the reasons why I focus so much on the things we do most often, because if you get the things that you do most often nailed down, you wind up saving so much more time, right? So.
Well, yeah, and at conference and trade show, I do the tips and tricks seminar, and
Right.
that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I try to preach that all the time. Yeah, anything that you're doing. And I was thinking about it, you got your bed knife stored right under where you change your bed knives.
Right.
And I do too now, but for years I kept them in the parts room.
And you're walking back and
I'm
forth.
walking back and forth. I'm like, why am I doing this?
Right.
So yeah, just little changes like that can save you so much time.
Yeah.